Welcome back to another Swordmaster Publications presentation. My name is Ernie Lawrence, and tonight we're going to be studying Deuteronomy chapter 32. Deuteronomy chapter 32 is the song of Moses that he received from God just before his death, and a lot of people don't really know what this song contains, and the evidence of that is in some of the songs that we sing in our hymnals. The first I have here is On Jordan's Stormy Banks. And here you have this idea of people standing on Jordan's stormy banks and looking to Canaan's fair and happy land. And the whole song is about Christians who think that the way that this is presented, that they are looking to heaven. In fact, you can see here in my songbook, it's titled Heaven. Right here in this section, and the idea is that the whole context of this song is them looking here on earth to heaven, which is supposed to be Canaan's land and whatever. But then in the chorus it says that we will rest in the fair and happy land by and by, just across on the evergreen shore, sing the song of Moses and the Lamb. And so that's one song, and I'll get to the problem with it here in just a minute. And then there's another one that's pretty popular called The New Song. And there's all kinds of problems with this one as well. It talks about mansions in heaven, and it's talking about, every bit of this, again, is talking about getting to heaven and being able to sing with the angels and with fellow Christians and just a whole bunch of different things related to getting to heaven. But when it says, I hope to hear throughout unnumbered days the song earth cannot know, and then it says they sing in heaven a new song of Moses and the Lamb. Huge problem with those songs. There's a complete lack of understanding of what the Song of Moses is about, which we're going to cover tonight. There's a complete lack of understanding of the book of Revelation, because a lot of people view the book of Revelation as God wins and we're all going to heaven and some kind of victory. And when they read in the book of Revelation about them singing the song of Moses, everybody just kind of lumps that all into this idea of the new heavens and the new earth, or all of this stuff. For so many people, it's just the end of time and we're looking towards heaven, and they think we're going to sing this song that Moses wrote. We have no idea what's in it, we have no idea what it's about, but we're going to sing it and it's going to be wonderful. That song is not wonderful for the people who it's about. And the reason that they were singing it in the book of Revelation was because it was a song of destruction about their enemies, that their enemies were going to be destroyed because of their wickedness. So keep those things in mind when you are going through this chapter here, listening to the words that God gives Moses to sing. And understand, this song, it's not a uplifting song. It's not a song that is all cheerful and happy and it's praise and worship. This is a song that God taught Moses to teach to Israel to sing throughout their generations, to remind them, hey, you get off the beaten path, you get off of the path that I have set for you, I'm going to utterly wipe you out, because that's what this song is about. So it's just kind of funny to me, just because of the circumstances, but really kind of frustrating to me, because when people sing those songs, they have no clue at all what it is that they're talking about, and it's kind of frustrating. I don't sing those songs. Of course, there's a number of songs I don't sing. In this one particular book here, maybe I'll do a series here on Swordmaster sometime about the songs that we sing. But in this book, there's 21.6% of the songs I cannot sing, because they contain error in them. And a lot of them have to do with heaven, a lot of them have to do with eschatology, and a lot of the things that we've been studying here. So anyway, let's get into this. This is going to be, you can see all the highlighting that I've got going on here. There's a lot. And you can also see all of the windows that I've already got open looking forward to other passages that we're going to look at tonight. So, Deuteronomy chapter 32 and verse 1. Give ear, O ye heavens, and I will speak, and hear, O earth, the words of my mouth. So again, Moses is the foundation for all of the rest of the Bible. Like you start in Moses, you start in those first 5 books, and it really helps you understand everything else that's going on in the Old Testament, which then helps you understand everything that's going on in the New Testament. And the fact that most people don't read their Old Testaments and understand what's going on in their Old Testament really shows when they read their New Testament, and it's all surface. It's all milk all the time. Very, very frustrating. Look at what he says here. Give ear, O heavens, hear, O earth. I already talked about that in previous videos. In chapter 31, he calls the leaders and he calls the people and he speaks. He says, I'm going to call heaven and earth to witness against you. And then he says, give ear, O heavens, and hear, O earth. He's singing the song now. This is the beginning of the song. Well, Isaiah actually quotes this. Verse 2, hear, O heavens, and give ear, O earth. And then I have nourished and brought up children, and they have rebelled against me. That's straight out of the Song of Moses. But then you scroll down. Hear the word of Jehovah, you rulers of Sodom, give ear unto the law of our God, you people of Gomorrah. Straight out of the Song of Moses. This isn't new stuff. He's talking to the rulers and the people of Israel. That's the explicit connection here. And so when you see this idea of heavens and earth, keep in mind that a lot of what God was talking about in the New Testament, especially through Paul and through Matthew and the Hebrew writer, all of these people were speaking of heaven and earth in these terms from the Song of Moses, from Deuteronomy, the idea of rulers and the ruled, not of the planet and the sky or space or God's throne. We're not talking in literal terms. A lot of the times we're not talking in literal terms. We're talking about the land, the promised land, and the rulers, the people who are ruling over the people who live in the promised land. And so in 2 Peter 3, when you get to the third heaven and the third earth there, the new heavens and the new earth, because the first set was destroyed by the flood, the second set was destroyed by a metaphorical flood of an army. The elements were burned up and all of that. That's the Jewish system. And the new heaven and the new earth, the new heavens and the new promised land, isn't us sitting on this side of heaven looking into the promised land. We're there now. We are in the promised land. We are in Canaan's land in that spiritual sense, because the new heavens and the new earth came in the first century after the Jews were taken out of the way. And it's all founded right here in the Song of Moses. Okay? So that's the first reference. First verse, and we've already got our first reference out of the way. It says, my doctrine or my teaching shall drop as the rain, my speech shall distill as the dew, as the small rain upon the tender herb, and as the showers upon the grass. This song, this teaching, was something that was meant to nourish them and help them grow, to provide for them so that they would live long in the land. God says that over and over and over again. And so he's meaning it in a way that will preserve them. It's a warning, but it's a warning of not saying, I'm going to wipe you out now, because these people are faithful. They're of courage. They're going in behind Joshua and they're going to conquer the land. So this generation is good. But God is telling them, you learn this song and you teach it. Every generation you teach it so that they know it, because one generation is going to come down the road 1,500 years later where it's going to apply. That this song is going to be meant for that generation. And so there's this idea of rain and dew and nourishment of the grass. Well, who's the grass? The grass are the people. We see this symbol in Revelation as well. When the grass gets burned up, or hurt not the trees, and we talk about the plant life and stuff, we're talking about the people of the promised land. Okay, it's talking about the Jewish people. And then he says, because I will publish the name of Jehovah, ascribe ye greatness unto our God. We're talking about God now. All right, it's very, very important to understand that. Ascribe ye greatness unto our God. He is the rock. God is the rock. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 4, talking about you can go back up to verse 1. Moreover, brethren, I would not that you should be ignorant how that all our fathers were under the cloud and all passed through the sea. They got baptized into Moses and the cloud and then the sea. Like, it's a type, anti-type that's so right there in your face. And did all eat the same spiritual meat and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Christ. You don't think the Bible teaches that Jesus Christ was God, or that he is God? Well, the rock was Christ. God, the rock. It doesn't get any clearer than that. If you think that the Bible doesn't teach that Jesus Christ is God, you don't know how to read. You are purposefully being obtuse, because it's that clear. He is the rock. His work is perfect. Remember, Jesus Christ, everything that was made by him. John chapter 1. His work is perfect, for all his ways are judgment, a God of truth. Right? Jesus says, I am the way, I am the truth, a God of truth and without iniquity. Look in Hebrews chapter 4. We do not have a high priest, talking about Jesus, which cannot be touched with the feeling of our infirmities, but was in all points tempted like as we are, yet without sin. He has no iniquity. Just and right is he, as we just got finished reading. They have corrupted themselves. Their spot is not the spot of his children. They are a perverse and crooked generation. What does Jesus say to the people that couldn't get rid of, they couldn't heal the son that had the lunatic, that he was kind of crazy in the head? The disciples come, they said, we can't cure him. Jesus says, "Oh, faithless and perverse generation." How many times does he refer to a wicked generation dealing with that generation that he was trying to preach to? Okay, so all of this coming straight out of the Song of Moses. Jesus is reminding them of this song. Paul is reminding them of this song. Matthew reminds them of this song. It was important to remember this song because this song was about their end. And if they kept singing it and remembering it, and it helped them to remain faithful, then that wouldn't be the generation. But eventually there came a generation that didn't remember. And they scoffed at it or laughed at it, or just, you get into the whole thing about singing something just because you've always sang it, but you don't really pay attention. On Jordan's stormy banks, nobody has a clue what that song's talking about. Not really. They think it's the song is obviously talking about heaven, but in singing that song, they're clueless in what the Bible actually teaches about those things. And so, maybe that's what this generation in the time of Christ was doing when they were singing this song. Do you thus requite Jehovah, O foolish people and unwise? Is not he thy father that hath bought thee? Okay, again, we're talking about Jesus here. We're talking about God the Son, but it says, is not he your father that bought you? How did God buy them? With his own blood, right? He made that purchase of them with his own blood. Talking about this generation in which all of this was going to be taking place. Right? This is looking forward to the first century when Jesus was crucified on the cross. He bought them. That there's not really much of a different way to understand that. He didn't buy them out of Egypt. He didn't purchase them out of Egypt. Okay, when God brought them out of Egypt, there was no purchasing that goes on. He just kind of tells Pharaoh how it's going to be. Pharaoh gets all uppity. God gives him some plagues, and Pharaoh's like, "Oh, yep, go ahead," and brings him out. But there's no purchase that's paid. There's no price that was paid for Israel, the nation. So is not he thy father that hath bought thee? When does that take place? That takes place at the cross. They're looking forward here when they sing this song. They're looking forward to the Messiah. Hath he not made thee and established thee? Remember the days of old. So when are we singing this song? We're singing this song in the future. That's the purpose of this song, is to look back. And so remember the days of old. The days right now that Moses is actually teaching them this song for the first time. Remember the days of old. Consider the years of many generations. How many generations? Well, right now we've only had one. But what we're really talking about is when they sing this song, generation after generation after generation, they're to remember back to the past when all of these events took place. Consider the years of many generations. Ask your father, and he will show you. Your elders, and they will tell you. This father here is their own father, the individual, the children's father. They will tell you. When the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance. Okay, this idea here is the kind of the creation of time, Babel, all of the stuff that happened in Genesis. That's what he's wanting them to remember. Divided to the nations their inheritance. When he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people according to the number of the children of Israel. Okay, so now you go from the time before the flood, the sons of Adam, and then eventually down to the point where in the promised land, the children of Israel get the promised land here to divide up amongst themselves as the children of Israel, not just the sons of Adam. And so for Jehovah's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. So now what we're talking about is the promised land and the inheritance that they got from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the promise that was given to those men. Here they are receiving that land. They're about to go out and conquer it. But remember, this song is meant to be sung into the future, so they're looking back when this was already taken place. And so this is sung proleptically. On this day when Moses is singing this song, teaching this song to them, they're looking forward to a time when what they're about to do has already happened. And so he talks about giving them the land of their inheritance. He says he found them in a desert land, that's Egypt, and in the waste, howling wilderness, that's the last 40 years. He led them about, instructed them, and he kept them and kept him as the apple of his eye. So he instructed them for 40 years. What happened during the wandering of the wilderness? Well, the first 5 books were written. Moses was teaching them. He was molding them and establishing them as a nation. That's what was happening. What happens in the first century? 40 years where we go through persecution as a church and we're receiving the revealed word, and all of that's being written down. Just like in the in the wilderness when they're wandering around. Again, 1 Corinthians 10. And then look at this, verse 11. And as an eagle stirs up her nest, fluttereth over her young, spreads abroad her wings, and takes them and beareth them on her wings. This is a symbol that you're going to see from time to time. You see it in Exodus 19:4. You have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. This idea of eagle's wings, there's 2 ways that the eagle is presented in Scripture. Number 1, the eagle is swift, powerful protection for God's people. When God uses the eagle in a beneficial way, then the eagle is a symbol of God's protection and power and the ability to preserve his people out of harm's way. The other side of that, same symbol, and we'll get to why here in just a second. The other side of that is the eagle is a swift and powerful hunter, and is able to bring about destruction against those who are wicked. That God brings in the symbol of the eagle, and we've already seen that in Deuteronomy chapter 28. And we see it again in Matthew 24 in the Olivet Discourse. We see it in Revelation. The idea of the eagle coming in represented God using a foreign army, specifically the Romans, who had the eagle on their crests and on their flags and pretty much all over the place. That was a symbol of Rome, just like the bald eagle is the symbol of America today. But the eagle was a raptor. It was a hunter, and it would come and it would destroy its prey. Well, those are the same thing. The symbol of the eagle protecting and the symbol of the eagle destroying are the same thing, because in the Roman army coming to destroy the Jews, God was protecting the church. And so those 2 symbols, they're literally the same side, or 2 sides of the same coin. And so this symbol is a very complex and very powerful symbol, because it's able to symbolize both things at once. Okay? Verse 12, so Jehovah alone did lead him, and there was no strange God with him. I highlighted this because there's an interesting doctrine, something that's come up in recent days or weeks or months, whatever, on the internet. Of course, the internet is the purveyor of all things weird. And there's a lot of people that want to talk about how God had a wife. In fact, this is made popular in a lot of different TV shows. I know that Lucifer has that, the show Lucifer on the CW or whatever it is. I know that Supernatural with the Winchesters has that idea in it. That was God's sister. Same difference. But there's this idea of a female counterpart to God. That's just the popular thing. It's just like the quote unquote Queen James version of the Bible. It's just everybody is nutso right now. There's no other way to say it. There's crazy. But God, in terms of who and what he is one God. He is one God, existing in three persons, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And we see this especially here in terms of the way that God is spoken of as the rock, as the Father that bought them, all of those kinds of things. But there is one God, and he did not have another God with him. Not only did he not share his power with these fake false gods like the gods of Egypt or the Phoenician gods or the Philistine gods or any of the other deities that were in the land of Canaan or anywhere. He didn't share with any of those because they're all fake false gods. But the fact that the Song of Moses says that there was no strange God with him, there was no foreign God, there was no other God with him, puts to rest this stupid idea of a second God or a second deity that was his wife or something nonsense like that. In fact, if you read through the books of prophecy, like especially the book of Ezekiel, you see that God considered himself married to Israel. God the Father was married to Israel, and she cheated on him, committed adultery, basically was a prostitute, and he divorced her, and then because she committed murder, he executed her. Jesus comes along and marries the new Israel, the spiritual Israel, which is the church. So God the Son marries Israel, that is, if you read in Galatians 4, it's the Jerusalem that's above, the spiritual Israel. And so God doesn't have a deity wife in that sense, as the popular rumor is. So I wanted to highlight that as this puts that to rest. The Bible absolutely does not claim anything about some kind of wife of God, and I don't remember what her name was. I think it starts with an A or something like that, but there is no other gods. There's no other real gods. There's no being that even comes close to God and his omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence. There's no other being exists. So he certainly wasn't going to travel with him. All right, enough of that. Verse 13, he made him ride on the high places of the earth, or the land, that he might eat the increase of the fields, and he made him to suck honey out of the rock and oil out of the flinty rock, butter of kine and milk of sheep, with fat of lambs and rams of the breed of Bashan, and goats, with the fat of kidneys of wheat, and you did drink the pure blood of the grape. So this is now, the song is singing about them being in the promised land and getting all of the bounty of it. Okay, so God is this song is taking them through the history, kind of like what Stephen does in Acts chapter 7. He takes them through the history of everything that God did for them, and he's going to show them what they do about it. But Jeshurun waxed fat and kicked. You are waxen fat, you are grown thick, you are covered with fatness. And then he forsook God, which made him, and lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. So again, we see this cycle. First of all, Jeshurun is the idea. In fact, you know what? I should have looked that up, and I didn't. I want to know what that name is. I did that early on in Genesis with all the names and whatever, and I got away from that habit. But Jeshurun, upright one, a symbolic name for Israel describing ideal character. Okay, so that makes sense. So this is the name, of course, of Israel, but I've not seen this word before. I say that I've not seen this word before this moment in the scriptures. So there's Jeshurun is the first time it's used in scriptures, is what I mean by that. Okay, so this is the upright one was waxed fat and kicked. You're waxed fat and you've grown thick. You are covered with fatness. So you're plump. You've eaten all of this good stuff and you've let it go to your belly. Is essentially what's happening. Then he forsook God, which made him, and lightly esteemed the rock of his salvation. Remember, God is the rock. Christ is the rock. The rock is salvation. It's all wrapped up together. Again, if you think that Jesus is not God, you're either being purposefully obtuse or you can't read. Verse 16, they provoked him to jealousy with strange gods. That's those fake false gods that don't have any power. With abominations provoked they him to anger. Now those abominations are the practices, the pagan practices, and a lot of those involved either a lot of sexually explicit stuff or sacrificing of children. And so they are abominations. They're the worst, most horrible things that you can bring to God in terms of what mankind invents to do. So now take a look at verse 17. It says, they sacrificed unto devils, not to God, to gods whom they knew not, to new gods that came newly up, whom your fathers did not fear. So these devils, these beings that they look to as gods, some of these fake false gods are actually devils. Now, I don't know that it means that in the literal sense of the beings, like the demons that believe and tremble in James 2 verse 17. James 2:19. But look at what he does. He associates these fake false gods who accept this kind of sacrifice as devils. And now, he's already mentioned this once in Leviticus at the beginning of their journey. In Leviticus 17:7, we talked about this, and they shall no more offer their sacrifices unto devils after whom they have gone a whoring. All of that's wrapped up to the same, but look at this. 2 Chronicles 11:15, and he ordained him priest for the high places and for the devils. This is talking about the northern tribes. This is talking about the wicked kings, and for the devils and for the calves which he had made. These are the fake false gods. And what did they do? What did they sacrifice? Psalm 106:37, yea, they sacrifice their sons and their daughters unto devils. That's why it's an abomination to God, is because they're killing their children. When you kill children this way, you are essentially worshiping devils. Abortion industry, pay attention, because that's what you're doing. And that's not a a metaphor. That's not a figure of speech. They're literally doing that. The people who worship Satan as an act of the Satanist religion are trying to support Planned Parenthood as Texas removes the capacity to do abortions. And they're mad about it. The Satanists are like, we're losing our sacrifices. Planned Parenthood, all those people, it's like they're all together. And so they're sacrificing unto devils by doing these abominations that are the sacrifice of their own children. And it is a most abhorrent, evil thing that God says man comes up with. That's how bad it is. So, again, we're going through this history of all of the things from Egypt all the way up through their history. 2 Chronicles, we're getting towards the end of Israel, of the northern tribes. And this song takes them through that history. Okay? And then it says, of the rock that begat you, you are unmindful, and has forgotten God that formed thee. Okay, again, God, the rock, same thing. Jesus, same thing. And when Jehovah saw it, he abhorred them. That means he hated them. because of the provoking of his sons and of his daughters. Now, a lot of people say God is love and God doesn't hate anybody, or God loves the sinner but hates the sin. In one sense, oh my goodness. Until it's getting late and I've been talking too much, but in one sense that is true, because it says that while we were yet sinners, God sent his son to die for us, and God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. In that sense, God does. But there comes a time when people become wicked enough that God hates them. And hate is a word that means that you dislike someone so much that you're willing to destroy them personally. God does that. God did that at the flood. God does that in Egypt. God does that when the Jews they murder his son, and they persecute the church. So God says, I abhor them. I hate them with an intense hatred, because of the provoking of his sons and of his daughters, because these people as a nation, as a group, have caused those who are their offspring to sin. And God does not like that. And he said, I will hide my face from them, and I will see what their end shall be. That's what this song is really about. From the beginning to the end, the Song of Moses is talking about the Jewish people, the Israelite people. I will see what their end shall be. God has a view of the end of Judaism in mind here at the beginning. This is not a temporary timeout for 2,000 years or 1948 years or whatever. It says, I will see what their end shall be. When God ends somebody, they don't come back. God ended Israel, the northern tribes. They didn't come back. And when he says, I will end them, I will see what their end shall be, it's over. Nobody should be expecting the Jews to come back as a nation to fulfill some as yet unfulfilled purpose. The whole Testament is fulfilled. It's done. It was completed and absolutely fulfilled by the end of the 1st century AD. Everything, and there's nothing left in the Old Testament that's left unfulfilled. That means nobody should be looking for some kind of Jewish state. The 1948 thing, you see how much problems that's caused. Because everybody is all the millennialists are all, wow, we should give them back their land. Well, if you look at every people on the planet, somebody has taken land from somebody else. Should we give them all back their land? Do you know how absurd that would be for us to go back and do that for every person who has been conquered and has had their land taken over by somebody else? That's not logical. That's irrational. And yet they did it with the Jews because they don't understand what God says here. I will see what their end shall be. He's talking about the 1st century. For they are a very froward generation, children in whom is no faith. Hebrews chapter 3 talks about the unbelief that they have. They have moved me to jealousy with that which is not God. In other words, these fake false gods. They have provoked me to anger with their vanities, and I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. So what is he talking about here? Paul talks about this. In the book of Romans, he talks about how Christianity is a thing that provokes the Jewish people to jealousy. That's what he's intending to do. My mic back here, so hopefully the sound's better now. I will move them to jealousy with those which are not a people. Right now, as the singing of this song is just starting, there is no nation that is the church, the kingdom. That's what it's talking about here. I will provoke them to anger with a foolish nation. What is Paul write in, I believe it's Corinthians? He says that by the foolishness of preaching that people are going to be saved. Well, provoked the Jews. They could not stand it. They didn't get it. They were blinded because they were so focused on self and their Jewness, their physicalness, and their addiction to Moses, who they did not understand. So again, we're talking about the first century here, the establishment of the church. Like, every bit of this is pointing forward to the establishment of the church, that time period. When Christ comes, the church is established, and the Jews are going to be destroyed. For a fire is kindled in my anger. Fire is always the symbol of God's judgment, his wrath. When John the Immerser is baptizing people in the Jordan, he says that there's somebody that's going to come after him that's greater than he, that was going to baptize with the Holy Spirit and with fire. And everybody's like, "Ooh, fill me with fire, fill me with fire." All the denominational people and a bunch of people in the church who don't know what they're talking about. I want to be filled with fire. No, you don't. Fire is God's symbol of destruction. If you get baptized with fire, you get wiped out. That's what that means. It's an either-or situation. And the being baptized with the Holy Spirit happened on Pentecost, into Cornelius' household, and to Paul. And those were representative of the Jews and the Gentiles. Not everybody gets that. It was only for the first century. Baptized with fire, also only for the first century. The Jews that did not convert to Christianity, destroyed because of their lack of faith. That's what that means. Shall burn into the lowest hell. That is the idea of Sheol there, the lowest Hades, the lowest grave. And shall consume the earth with her increase and set on fire the foundations of the mountains. What is all of this? Is this the whole planet? No, this is the promised land. Consume the earth, the land, with her increase. All of that fat that they was just talking about in the song, where they had all this bounty and it made them fat and lazy and forget God, that's all going to get burned up. We'll go to 2 Peter chapter 3. When it talks the earth or the land is going to be burned up with fervent heat. That's not talking about the whole planet. That's talking about the promised land. It was going to be burned up in war. When the Romans marched through, they hit city after city after city, scorched earth. They ruined the crops. They completely decimated. No, decimated is the wrong word. They completely wiped out the Jewish economy. It was completely gone. And then when they got to Jerusalem, everybody was starving, didn't have any water, famine, all of that stuff. Completely burned up. Not the planet, it's talking about the promised land. And I will heap mischiefs upon them. I will spin mine arrows upon them. God doesn't have literal arrows. He uses armies, foreign armies. This is all of this stuff being burned up, and then he's going to shoot arrows at them? What? If you think that this is about the destruction of the planet, there's nothing left to shoot arrows at. That doesn't make any sense. But if we're talking about how an army is going to march through and do this scorched earth policy, besiege Jerusalem, arrows are going to be shot because they're under siege. They shall be burnt with hunger. Remember back to chapter 26 or 28, how they were going to be so hungry they were going to eat their own children. You will be devoured with burning heat and with bitter destruction. I will also send the teeth of beasts upon them. This idea or this image of beast is the foreign nations, the Gentile nations, and the poison of the serpents of the dust. The sword without and terror within shall destroy both the young men and the virgin, the suckling also with the man of gray hairs. This is Jerusalem. This is the siege in AD 70 that Josephus writes about. This is Deuteronomy chapter 28 and how bad it was going to be in the siege of Jerusalem. I said I would scatter them into corners. I would make the remembrance of them cease from among men. Now, that doesn't mean, obviously we have it written here in the Bible, we're going to remember them, but the idea of their presence, they would no longer be a nation. This isn't just a temporary thing like Babylon. The Babylonian captivity was a 70-year kind of timeout for the Jews for their disobedience. God's talking about a permanent thing here. When he brings this about, there's no coming back from it. I will make the remembrance of them to cease from among men. There will be no more Jewish state. The people that are over there right now in Israel, they're good people. They're great allies of the United States. They're not biblical Israel. They're not the people of the Bible, and you can compare the two nations. They're not the same. They have some similarities, but those people follow the rabbis, the Jewish teachings of men that are not inspired. They barely follow anything out of Moses. They don't have a temple. They don't make sacrifices. They don't have a Levitical priesthood. Everything that made them Israel doesn't exist among them. And moreover, the point of them being a holy nation chosen out of the world was to bring Messiah into the world already happened. And so, as kind as I can be about the nation today that is Israel, they're not biblical Israel. They're just another nation of men, like any other nation on the planet. And millennialists, they miss it completely and totally, because God says that would be their utter end. Were it not that I fear the wrath of the enemy, lest their adversaries should behave themselves strangely, unless they should say, our hand is high and Jehovah has not done all this. This is talking, kind of speaking as the Israelites. For they are a nation void of counsel. In other words, they're going to say all this stuff because they have no wisdom. They're not looking at things correctly. Neither is there any understanding in them. Go to Romans chapter 3 and verse 10 and 11. Paul talks about the difference between the Jew and the Gentile. He quotes the book of Psalms and says that there is none righteous, no, not one, none that seeks after God, none that understands. And everybody applies that to all humans for all time, and that's not what that verse is talking about. That verse, those verses, are hearkening back to the Song of Moses and the Psalms and the prophets that talked about Israel and their inability to understand the things that God is telling them right now. There isn't any understanding in them. Oh, that they were wise, that they understood this, that they would consider their latter end. This isn't just an end. This is the last end. This is the very end. This is the end to end all endings. The last days is what this is talking about. How should one chase 1,000 and two put 10,000 to flight, except their rock had sold them and Jehovah had shut them up? Why could they be defeated so easily? God said, I'm not going to have anything to do with you anymore. He says that I'm removing my protection from around you, and because of what they were going to do, he was going to destroy them. And understand this. This is God, the rock, the Christ, doing the attacking. What did Jesus say in the Olivet Discourse? What did he say at the end of Mark chapter 8 and on into chapter 9? What did he say in the book of Revelation? He was the one that was coming. He was the one that would besiege Jerusalem and destroy them. He does this through the Roman army, but Christ claims the credit for this. He says, I'm the one that's going to do this. Jesus, God the Son, is the one that's making this attack and bringing about the utter end. The one who brought them out of Egypt, the one who protected them in the wilderness, the one who provided all of this stuff for them in the promised land, is going to be the one that destroys them because of their lack of faithfulness, because of their whoring after these other gods, because of their abomination of sacrificing children, because of all the evil things that they did. He was going to completely and totally end them. For their rock is not as our rock. In other words, they trusted in these fake false gods. It's a pebble, it's a rock, it's an inanimate object. Instead of studying or following after the foundation rock that is Jesus Christ. Even our enemies themselves being judges, they're going to look at him and laugh and say, look, your God can't do anything, because they are not following after Jehovah God. They're following after God the rock, this little fake idol that they made. And so the enemies are going to look at him and say nothing. Now look here, going back to several passages, I've brought this up. For their vine is the vine of Sodom, and of the fields of Gomorrah. Their grapes are grapes of gall, their clusters are bitter. First of all, Sodom and Gomorrah. How many times is Israel compared to Sodom and Gomorrah spiritually? Does it here? Does it in Isaiah? Does it in Isaiah chapter 1 and verse 10, which we just read? does it in a number of places. And then when you come to Revelation chapter 11, and it talks about the city that's spiritually compared to Sodom and Egypt, there's only one city that can be. It has to be that one city, and it's Jerusalem. It's so obvious and evident, I don't understand why people miss it. I mean, I do. They don't understand their Old Testament. They don't read their Old Testament. And because of that, they miss it. They just assign it to whatever some person in the pulpit or some scholar says that it should be. But Rome was never compared to Sodom spiritually, and never compared to Egypt spiritually anywhere in the Bible. Jerusalem, many times. Here's one of them. And then their grapes are grapes of gall, and their clusters are bitter. Think about the whore of Babylon sitting on the beast in Revelation 17, drinking the wine that's the blood of the saints. Gall and bitterness, wormwood, all of that. Their wine is the poison of dragons. This word dragon here is tannin. This is not a little bitty snake. This is not a hyena. This is the word tannin when we see in the book of Job when Leviathan is talked about. He's a sea dragon. He's a tannin. These are great, powerful beasts. We're talking essentially about dinosaurs. For those who kind of follow the apologetics type stuff like I do. But these are the great dragons. What were called dragons back in the day before we coined the term dinosaur, digging up their bones in the 1800s. Okay, their wine is the poison of dinosaurs, is what this is saying. Great dragons. And the cruel venom of asps. Is not this laid up in store with me and sealed up among my treasures? And understand this. This is all Israel. These are properties of Israel. And when you see the grapes, the wine that they're drinking, that's their wine. That's the blood of the saints that they created this wine to drink because of their persecution. Their wine is the poison of dragons. I've said now for at least a decade. It took me a while to learn this. I didn't come to this early on, but it took me a while to learn this. But the red dragon in Revelation chapter 12 is the Jewish state. The Jewish state with the 7 Herods. And so when we read about the wine, their wine is the poison of dragons, that's because they're the great red dragon in Revelation chapter 12. The cruel venom of asps. Is not this laid up in store with me and sealed up among my treasures? To me belongeth vengeance and recompense. Their foot shall slide in due time. So all of the things that were bounties to them would be taken away. And all of the things that they become, these cruel, evil, poisonous, disgusting people that God hates because of their abominations, He takes away their treasures. And He brings vengeance and recompense to them. Their foot shall slide in due time. In other words, they're going to slip and fall because of their wickedness. For the day of their calamity is at hand. Now again, remember, this is a song that is being sung as if it's being sung in the future when all of this is supposed to happen. They should be singing this 1500 years from now, looking back at what's going on when Moses first teaches a song and talking about all of these things. So when the end comes, the day of their calamity is at hand, and the things that shall come upon them make haste. How many times in the book of Revelation does Jesus tell John, the time is at hand, behold I come quickly, these are things which must shortly come to pass? That's again quoting the Song of Moses. For Jehovah shall judge his people and repent himself for his servants when he sees that their power is gone and there is none shut up or left. In Matthew 25, when Jesus is giving his Olivet Discourse, he talks about himself as judge. Remember, this is all God the Son that we're talking about in this passage. Jesus talks about himself as judge, and he judges the nations. The two nations that are in view there are the church and the Jewish state. And there's one that's going to go to the right hand and one that's going to go to the left. But this judging that is done by Christ. At the end of time, Christ is not the judge. Christ is the lawyer. Christ is the advocate. He's the defense attorney for those who are in his church, in his kingdom. And he stands before God the Father and says, I've already paid the debt for all these people. They get into heaven. That's Christ's role at the end of time. But when Christ is judge, his judgment is against Israel. His condemnation is of Israel, not of the church, and it's not a role that he takes on at the end of time, like we read about in 1 Corinthians 15. Okay, so he's the power of Israel is gone. There's no more reason for them. There's nothing left for them. Their end is utter. They've done all that they were meant to do, and there's nothing left. So God's going to destroy them because of their wickedness. And he shall say, where are their gods, their rock in whom they trusted? In other words, he's going back to this idea of that they went after rocks that weren't the rock, that was Christ. They went after these rocks and sticks and these fake false gods. And when he comes to bring justice against them, he's going to be like, where are your fake gods now? Why aren't they helping you? Because they're nothing. Which did eat the fat of their sacrifice and drank the wine of their drink offerings. Like, they got fat off of this stuff. They brought in all of these sacrifices of all of these things and demanded all of these kind of tithing type things to these fake false gods, and the rulers got fat off of that. And he says, yeah, now you get to pay for it. Because those fake false gods, you led my people into corruption, and I'm going to destroy you for it. Let them rise up and help you and be your protection. I mean, God is mocking them. He's like, you go after these sticks and stones to be your gods? Let them help you. Let them stand against me. I mean, that's taunting. I mean, we're talking the 450 prophets of Baal here. This is what's going on. With Elisha mocking their gods. See now that I, even I, am he, and there is no God with me. And there's no other God. He's saying, not that there was one alongside him, but that there isn't any other God that exists alongside Jehovah God. Because there's only one true and living God. I kill and I make alive. He's the creator. He can do with his creation as he wills. I wound and I heal. Neither is there any that can deliver out of my hand. Why? Because there's nothing anywhere in existence that is even approachable to God, who is omnipotent. There isn't anything else. For I lift up my hand to heaven and I say, live forever. Well, that's powerful. He says, I lift up my hand to heaven. When he holds you in his hand and he lifts you up to heaven and says, live forever, you get to live forever. Those who are faithful to him, that's what they get to do. That's the remnant there that he's talking about. If I whet my glittering sword and my hand take hold on judgment, I will render vengeance to mine enemies, and I will reward them that hate me. Those who are going to stand against him, they don't get to live forever, because when God decides that you should die, you get to die. You can't do anything about it. I will make my arrows drunk with blood, and my sword shall devour flesh, and that with the blood of the slain and of the captives from the beginning of revenges upon the enemy. And remember, the earth's already burned up. The promised land is already burned up. And now he's going to bring in these arrows and swords. We're talking about a foreign army here. The Romans are we know from looking at the New Testament and all that was going on at the time, but they don't know that. And Rome doesn't even exist at this time. And so he's talking about this foreign army was going to come, and he was going to devour them with this foreign army, destroy them utterly, their very end. It says, rejoice, O ye nations, with his people, for he will avenge the blood of his servants. That's the Christians, the martyrs, right? And will render vengeance to his adversaries, and will be merciful unto his land and to his people. Again, that's the Christians. Because the people who were persecuting the Christians were the Jews, the Jewish state. Now, some of those Jews, they converted to Christianity and become part of the church. Those are part of those who God is merciful to. But the people that the Jews were persecuting at that time, the church are God's servants at that time when he brings in this judgment. And the ones that he brings judgment against are the Jews. That's it. That's the song. It is everything from Egypt to the first century, and it's God teaches them the song and says, this is going to be your end. Sing it, remember it, know it, and you'll live a long time. You don't remember it, or you fail to keep understanding it, and this is going to be you. And it eventually is what happened. Now we're going to transition here. We're going to talk about the last little bit of Moses here. It says, as Moses came and spake all the words of this song in the ears of the people, he and Hoshea, that's Joshua, the son of Nun. And Moses made an end of speaking all these words to Israel. And he said unto them, set your hearts unto all the words which I testify among you this day, which you shall command your children to observe to do all the words of this law. For it is not a vain thing for you, because it is your life. Okay, so he tells them, this is your life. Through this thing you shall prolong your days. What was the purpose of this song? To remind them, to say, this is going to be your end. One day you're going to reach a complete and total end because of your wickedness, because you were sacrificing babies, amongst many other things. And so he says, this isn't an empty thing for you. Remember this song. It's very important because it is life to you. You are going to prolong your days as a nation if you will remember it. In the land, whither you go over Jordan to possess it. So he brings them back to the present. He says, you're about to go over and possess this land, but you need to remember this song, because as you go into this land, this song is about the time when God removes you from this land. And Jehovah spake unto Moses that selfsame day, saying, get you up into this mountain Abarim, unto Mount Nebo, which is in the land of Moab, that is over against Jericho, and behold the land of Canaan, which I give unto the children of Israel for a possession. And die in the mount where you go up, and be gathered unto your people, as Aaron your brother died in Mount Hor, and was gathered unto his people. This idea of gathering unto the people, obviously, we can look back through the entirety of the Pentateuch, and there's nobody in Mount Nebo that's buried there. So he's not talking about physical, but he's talking about in paradise, in Sheol, being gathered with the faithful, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all the forefathers that have gone before that have been faithful. That's what God is saying, is you will die in this mountain. You're going to go up, you get to see the promised land, but you're going to die up there. You're not coming back down the mountain. But I'm telling you, Moses, that I'm taking you to paradise. Not heaven, paradise and Sheol. Go read Luke 16. Because you trespass against me among the children of Israel, the waters of Meribah, Kadesh, in the wilderness of Zin, because you sanctified me not in the midst of the children of Israel. In other words, he disobeyed. He didn't think that God was holy, and so he smote the rock instead of spoke to it. Yet you shall see the land before you, but you shall not go thither into the land which I give the children of Israel. So this is what God tells Moses to do. He says, you've taught them the song. This is the end. Joshua's writing all of this down, probably as fast and furious as he can. And he hears these words that God speaks to Moses, because Joshua is also going to be hearing God's voice as he rules the people from this time, kind of shepherds them, not as a king, but as a shepherd, like Moses was. And God gives these final, last commands to Moses. Tells him what to do, reminds him, hey, you messed up. You have to face the consequences, but I'm going to gather you to the faithful in Sheol, in paradise. And so that's the end of the chapter, and I think you can see going through and looking at this, that when we talk about the Song of Moses is not all happy joy joy. The Song of Moses is this song of a remembrance of the things that God did for them, but a warning to them of their utter end, that you will become wicked one day, and I will destroy you because of it. In your latter end, the ultimate end, the uttermost end. It was the end of the Jewish people. And so we're not going to be singing the Song of Moses in heaven as some kind of a worship song. We're gonna be we're gonna be singing hopefully other songs that leave all of the destruction and evil and wickedness of this world behind. But when we sing On Jordan's Stormy Banks, or the new song, or some of the other songs that talk about the Song of Moses, because people read the Revelation, the book of Revelation, and don't understand what the Song of Moses actually is, they need to come back and they need to read this chapter, and they need to understand what this chapter is actually talking about, and then stop singing those songs, because those songs don't teach truth. I hope you've gotten something out of this. This kind of wraps up all of the heavy stuff. We've got a couple more chapters to talk about, with when Moses actually goes up and dies, and them preparing to go across the Jordan and all of that. But we've kind of finished up with the really thick, heavy stuff as far as Deuteronomy goes. As always, if you have questions, find me on social media, leave comments below in the video, contact me however you are able, and I always look forward to your questions. My name is Ernie Lawrence, and this has been another Swordmaster Publications presentation, and we'll see you for chapter 33.